The ground trembled. From above, a shadow tore through the low sky, an A-10 Thunderbolt II, flying so close to the ground that the roar of its engines felt like it was shaking the bones. The infantry, trapped between the mountains, watched hell closing in around them. Anti-tank missiles, artillery, smoke. The convoy was doomed, but then someone ignored the order to retreat. No authorization, no support, no cover. The pilot turned the aircraft straight into enemy fire, dove into the valley, and unleashed the 30mm cannons at less than 100 feet, turning chaos into silence. No one knew who was in that cockpit. But one thing was certain, that maneuver wasn't in any manual. And that day, the rookie proved that courage doesn't need permission. The hangar still smelled of kerosene and cold metal when she arrived. Morning was breaking over the Koran Desert, painting the sky in shades of copper. Between the shadows of lined-up fighter jets, a figure walked with her flight suit zipped tight, helmet under one arm, and the gaze of someone carrying a purpose no one else could understand. Her name was Lieutenant Ava Lockhart, 36 years old U.S. Air Force fighter pilot, daughter of a civilian flight instructor and an electronics technician. She grew up in a small town where planes flew so low the roof would tremble. While other children ran to hide from the noise, Ava ran outside to watch the aircraft disappear into the clouds. Since childhood, she had dreamed of flying, not for the glory, but for the silence she found above the clouds. During training at the academy, she was always the first to arrive and the last to leave. While her classmates competed to see who could log the most flight hours, she studied wind patterns, geography, and ballistic noise. But in the Falcon Strike Squadron, where she was assigned, technical merit wasn't enough. There, respect was measured in scars, and Ava had none. On her first day as she crossed the mess hall, conversations fell silent for a moment. A veteran pilot, known for testing every newcomer, deliberately dropped his cup of coffee in front of her. She didn't flinch. She simply pulled a handkerchief from her pocket, wiped the spill, looked up and said, "Next time, aim better." A low murmur rippled through the room. From that moment on, Ava Lockhart was no longer just the rookie. She became the enigma no one could decipher. Her talent was undeniable, but her calmness irritated everyone. The superiors called her impulsive. Her peers called her the coldest pilot in the squadron. But deep down, she carried an almost obsessive sense of responsibility, to save lives, even if it meant defying her own command. During simulation drills, Ava kept her aircraft steady under conditions that would make any other pilot lose control. But when the instructor demanded a low-altitude attack maneuver, she hesitated, not out of fear, but calculation. The wind was wrong, and the thermal sensor was giving static interference. Even so, the commander reprimanded her in front of everyone. "You weren't born for combat. You should be flying training drones." Laughter echoed through the hangar. Ava didn't respond. She simply adjusted her helmet, climbed into the A-10 Thunderbolt and took off. Up there, the silence wrapped around her like an old promise. She knew that every wrong move could be a death sentence, but every perfect turn was an undeniable truth. Her instincts never failed her. And time would prove it. One day, the sound of alarms cut through the air. A military medical team and 15 soldiers were stationed at an improvised forward base, evacuating the wounded after an enemy strike. When they tried to extract the last survivors, they were ambushed by insurgents. Contact was lost in the northern sector of the desert. The transmissions were chaotic. Gunfire, explosions, voices begging for evacuation. The veteran pilots were too far away to respond. Ava, by coincidence or destiny, was the closest. While the radio burst with conflicting orders, she took a deep breath and stared at the red horizon. That morning, no one expected anything from the rookie pilot. And that's exactly why no one realized what she was about to do. The base radio erupted in static and overlapping voices. On the digital map, the medical convoy's signals blinked intermittently, a sign of interference or destruction, an ambush. The ground unit Echo 7 had been surrounded by insurgents in the Dharan Range, a region so treacherous that even drones avoided flying over it. Narrow valleys, crosswinds, and a nearly blind radar. The kind of zone no one wanted to enter, especially not a rookie pilot. Ava Lockhart stared at the control panel of her A-10 Thunderbolt. Lights flickered in sequence. The mission alert was active, but takeoff clearance never came. Through the loudspeaker, Commander Briggs's voice cut the air, firm and final. "Lock down runway 2. No aircraft takes off without Central Command authorization. Ava tightened the strap of her helmet beneath her chin, her heartbeat sinking with the distant hum of engines. Every minute of waiting meant soldiers bleeding on the ground. The hangar's silence was suffocating. Veteran pilots stood with crossed arms, waiting for orders that wouldn't come. One muttered under his breath, "They won't risk a bird for this." The terrain's suicide. Ava looked at the tactical map projected on the wall. The coordinates flashed red, Echo 7 critical position. She knew what that meant. Without air cover, the medics and the civilians under their protection would be slaughtered. Briggs caught her expression and walked up to her cockpit. Don't even think about it, Lockhart. You heard the order." She kept her eyes on the panel, saying nothing. The commander leaned closer, voice low and sharp. "You're good, but you're still just a name on a report. Don't throw your career away." Ava took a slow breath. On her auxiliary screen, the radar showed faint heat signatures, vehicles on the move. She didn't need to see the massacre to know it had already begun. Her hands trembled slightly on the controls. The radio kept transmitting distant screams, "Medic down." "Convoy hit. We need air cover." Ava closed her eyes for a moment. The pilot's oath echoed in her mind. Protect those on the ground, above all else. When she opened them again, a decision had already taken shape. She powered up the engines. The Thunderbolt's roar shook the hangar walls. Technicians backed away in shock. Commander Briggs' voice burst through the comms. "Lockhart!" "That's a direct order. Cut your engines now." But it was too late. The A-10 thundered down the runway, kicking up dust and gravel. Wind whipped the squadron flags hard against their masts. Ava pulled the stick. The aircraft lifted off, climbing steeply, as if the desert itself was pushing her toward the sky. Over the radio, Briggs's voice cracked with desperation. "Lockhart, return immediately. You are not authorized for combat." Her reply came calm and steady, like a sniper's breath before the shot. "Commander, the massacre has already started, and I'm not watching from here." The engine's roar was the last sound before her signal vanished from the radar. While the base scrambled to understand what had just happened, Ava was already diving between the mountains, alone, without support, without orders. But what she was about to face would make even the veterans doubt what they had seen that day. The sun was rising, slicing through the thin mist that blanketed the desert. From above, Ava Lockhart saw chaos. The Echo 7 convoy was trapped between two canyons, burning vehicles, black smoke rising like the pillars of a moving inferno. The radio crackled with fragmented noise, screams, confused orders, desperate evacuation calls. Ava gripped the control stick tightly. The panel shook under the vibration of the engines. A-10 Thunderbolt II, the Warthog, built for this. To survive where no other aircraft dared to descend, Ava adjusted her helmet visor, cross-referencing data on the HUD. Thermal markers showed dozens of hostiles moving through the dunes. Camouflaged anti-aircraft guns, likely Zu-23s, and at least 3 shoulder-launched missile systems. No fighter support, no drones. She was completely alone. "This is Lockhart, 214th Tactical Squadron, requesting visual confirmation of Echo 7. The reply came through static and panic. "We're surrounded. They're on all sides. If you can see the white smoke, that's us. Everything else is hostile." Ava took a deep breath. 3 seconds of silence. Then she pulled the A-10 into a brutal dive. The roar of the engines tore through the valley. The aircraft plunged at a 40-degree angle, slicing the air like a blade. Altitude dropped from 8,000 to 500 feet in seconds. The proximity alarm screamed. The ground surged up through the windshield. She armed the GAU-A-A Avenger, 7 barrels spinning ready to fire. Target locked. An enemy armored column advancing on the medical convoy. Then came the roar, 70 rounds per second. The sound was deafening, almost supernatural. The 30mm cannon ripped through the vehicles, turning steel into dust and fire. Each impact shook the air like dry thunder. Ava held the firing line steady, dodging missile trails that streaked across the screen like serpents of fire. One passed so close that the heat sensors erupted in a red warning flash. She rolled the A-10, climbed sharply, and the sky itself seemed to collapse behind her. The second pass came even lower. She could see the soldiers' faces on the ground, wide eyes, trembling hands, hope returning amid the chaos. She aimed for the left flank, destroyed the anti-air positions, and cleared a corridor for extraction. Then, a hit. The right wing shuddered violently. Red lights flared across the panel. Fuel leak. Hydraulic systems failing. Lockhart, your right engine's on fire. Get out of there now. She didn't respond. Instead, she lowered the nose of the A-10 and dove again. The cannon's roar drowned out everything else, and when the last enemy vehicle exploded, the valley fell silent. A heavy, almost reverent silence. Ava pulled the stick hard, fighting the crippled plane that no longer obeyed completely. The engine coughed, the fuselage burned, but she was still flying. She looked toward the horizon, and for the first time saw the flickering lights of the convoy escaping into the dunes. They were alive. As she stabilized the aircraft and turned back toward base, Ava knew the battle was won, but her personal war was only beginning. Command would never forgive what she had done. And soon she would learn that surviving the fire was the easy part. The A-10 Thunderbolt II landed amid smoke and alarms. The landing gear collapsed on impact, sparks trailed across the runway, and the wounded aircraft dragged itself for more than 100 meters before stopping. Ava manually shut down the left engine. The right one was already dead. Silence. Inside the cockpit, the sound of her own heartbeat filled the space. She removed her helmet. The hot air and the smell of burned metal mixed with dust. For a moment she remained still, staring at her fractured reflection in the panel. There was no victory there, only the aftermath of something that could never be undone. Emergency vehicles arrived seconds later. Medics rushed toward her, but Ava refused help. She climbed down on her own, limping, and walked to the front of the plane. The name engraved below the cockpit still gleamed through the soot. Captain Ava Lockhart. She ran her hand over the letters and realized that, for the first time, she felt no doubt about having honored them. Hours later, the hangar was silent. The officers had gathered. The report on Operation Sandvale lay on the table. Over 100 civilians injured, but no fatalities. One soldier killed, several wounded, but also a direct violation of command orders. Disobedience in an active combat zone. Ava was called in to testify. When she entered, no one stood. The general in charge of the inquiry looked at her the way one looks at an unsolvable problem. Captain Lockhart, why did you decide to act alone, defying direct orders from command? She didn't avert her gaze. Because they were still alive, sir, asking for help. If I hadn't gone, it would have been much worse. Silence. One of the colonels tried to press further, citing protocol, chain of command, diplomatic risk. But she didn't argue. She simply folded her hands and waited. The hearing seemed to last an eternity. In the end, there was no sentence and no applause. The official record read only, "Extraordinary action under exceptional conditions. Report under review, nothing more. No commendation. No punishment. Just a bureaucratic void, which in the military world means only one thing. The matter is too big to be spoken of." In the days that followed, something curious happened. The mechanics who worked on the A-10 asked not to replace the fuselage. They wanted to leave it as it was, marked with bullet holes and a scorched emblem, to remember what it endured. And quietly, someone painted a red line beneath her name, a symbol used when a pilot returns with a damaged aircraft. But the mission complete, Ava kept flying. No ceremony, no interviews, no mention in official reports. But every time a new pilot arrived at the squadron, the veterans told the story, not as a legend, but as a warning. They only said, there was a day when command ordered a retreat, and she chose to stay. That night, alone on the airfield, Ava looked up at the dark sky, the same sky that had almost swallowed her. A dry wind passed, and she whispered, "Mission accomplished. No drama, no regret, only truth. Some follow orders. Others follow what's right. And sometimes that's what changes the course of a war." Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next episode, where every mission tells a story.